Authorship and identity. In the previous chapter in Heidegger's essay, The Origin of the Work of Art, the author observed at the outset that the question concerning the origin of the work of art asks about the source of its nature. On the usual view, the work arises out and by meaning of the activity of the artist, but what and whence is the artist what he is? By the work, for to say that the work does credit to the master means that it is the work that first lets the artist emerge as a master of his art. Artwork and artist are linked as co-constructions, as effects of a strategy reading which aligns together in a certain light the designated maker, the individual artist, genius, or by extension an entire milieu or mentality, and was staged as its effects or products. This has dominated disciplinary practice since well before art history's institutionalization in Europe in the 19th century. For example, in early semiotic practices known under the name of connoisseurship, concerned with interpreting palpable signs of authenticity and authorship. Modern art historical and museum practices have been grounded in attempts to maintain and consistently apply certain theories of authorship consonant with particular Western philosophical and ideological concepts of the individual subject and its ethical, legal, religious, and political responsibilities. Western art history was traditionally dominated by the promulgation of a paradigm of the normally singular, unique, inspired, and usually male artist. And the uniquely original artifact of that inspiration indissolubly linked as originating cause and effective product. But following upon Heidegger's remarks cited above, is the idea of the artist as product or alternatively a function of the discursive and museological system itself, or both, and if both, exactly how? What benefits accrue to different notions of authorship or artistic identity? If notions of authorship and artistry are co-constructed with notions of artwork and objecthood, should we expect there to be as many artistic persona as artistic styles and modes of production? Where does responsibility for the ostensible appearance of a work belong? And how should we distinguish between different modes of causality in the interpretation of works, formal, effective, or final causes, for example, where the person or group commissioning a work might be regarded by a society or a particular time and place as its true originating or effective author. From such a perspective, is the maker or producer framed as co-author or as merely a material realizer on behalf of a patron to whom might accrue the ultimate conceptual originality and responsibility? The 7 texts make up this chapter offer a variety of perspectives on these issues. The chapter begins with the 1969 essay by Michel Foucault, What is an Author?, which at the time of its publication was seen as deeply problematizing and historically contextualizing recent conventional Western notions of authorship as fixed and constant. For not a few observers at the time, the essay effectively reopened a wider historical and critical awareness of the actual complexity of changing ideas of his authorial and artistic identity in the West. If the idea of authorship was historically contingent, then the death of that idea was also conceivable. Foucault argued that much of the inherited importance of what he termed the author function was inextricably rooted in early European religious discourse, and specifically in that technique of textual exegesis of the Bible and in the early years of the Christian religion. He argued that the criteria of authenticity of sacred texts articulated by the translator of the Christian sacred text from Greek and Hebrew into Latin, St. Jerome, underlay many modern assumptions in literary and cultural study which arguably function in similar ways, structurally similar ways. The author function was essential to what Foucault termed the fundamental critical category of the man and his work, a structural construct which has underlain the professionalization of the art world in the modern period. The essay reinvigorated debates on the natural nature of the individual subject in a number of academic fields by persuasively arguing that it too was neither universal nor constant, even within the parochial history of Western institutions themselves. But while Foucault's essay problematized conventional modern notions of authorship, to a certain extent echoing some of the arguments of Heidegger in the 1935 essay, seen by hindsight nearly 4 decades later, Foucault's critical of the establishment remained largely circumscribed with the academic discourses of Western theory and European social and cultural history. The other texts collected in this and the following chapter could be seen as over and against Foucault's seminal essay, and their interrogations of issues and problems regarding authorship, artistries, and subjectives unengaged by the latter's Eurocentrist, and for some abstractly universalizing preoccupations. And yet Foucault is nonetheless engaged with and read through by many of the following selections, and not least by these introductions. I have not staged these assortments of text as illustrations of principles for my introduction, in which my introductions of each chapter would highlight and explicate as the texts that bear them unfold in your reading and discussing. That position is not without its implications for understanding power relations that are never not gendered and classed, all human knowledge being partial or perspectival. Such partiality structurally exists in a dialectic tension with what is simultaneously co-constructed. Walter Benjamin was acutely aware of these ironies and paradoxes, and addressed them performatively in and by his unfinished and posthumously published manuscript known by the name The Arcades Project, where he dreamt of a text composed entirely of citations or excerpts from others' texts, of all of which is precisely to the point of many of the arguments raised and contested, overtly or implicitly, in and by the texts in the present chapter. All the subsequent readings here by Owens, Kelly, Butler, Chow, Jones, and Doyle deal with the multiple inflections of these questions and represent a spectrum of voices spanning some 4 decades, from the late 1960s to the early 21st century, with the majority spanning a 2-decade period from the early 1980s onward. As with all of the texts collected in this volume, these present issues and problems to reckon with in both senses of the term, with implications for one's own interest and practices. The selections chart diversifying interest and identity formations and the position of the subject in various modalities. In the first piece, from 1983, Owens considers some recent vicissitudes of binary thought insofar as feminist theory and artistic practice of the 1980s constitute a postmodernist attention to hegemonic power, with the implications for what at the time appeared, largely from perspectives of New York at the time, to be certain ambivalence towards theory in the feminist then current. Much of Owens's critique of these developments is grounded in a Foucauldian perspective of the indignity of speaking for others. Mary Kelly's 1984 text, reviewing modernist criticism, considers the construction of the artistic text and of authenticity in the discourse on modernism and its challenges, comparing painting and film with respect to the ratio or emphasis upon the actual gesture of construction. The latter is linked by the modern needs of the market for artistic or authorial legibility, emphasizing the presence of the artist in the work. A situation ironized not only by cinema but by postmodern practices of a wide variety of types and genres. The 1988 text by Judith Butler, originally published in Theater Journal, discusses the phenomenological construction of gender through the repetition of gendered acts, whose production can simultaneously be read as problematizing or ironizing the absolute fixities of any such construction. It is precisely in production of the compelling illusion of gender as an object of belief that the possibility of contesting its fixities lies, a point emphasized in a different register in the coded to this volume. Butler's linkage of theater, philosophy, and art provides an expanded field of implication to the questions of the modern and postmodern fabrications of artistic text and artistic authenticity. The latter issue is taken up 4 years later in Ray Chow's 1992 meditation on the political implications of postmodern text and performance, in which the modernism-postmodernism problem is displaced from the realms both of opposition and historical sequence, and is made more complex by being reconfigured as a network of ideas, concepts, and artistic legacies at different stages of development. At the same time, the implications of both terms are seen as functions of real historical and cultural context, whereas modern and was postmodern are functions of time, place, gender, class, and social development. Amelia Jones's 2002 essay, originally presented in 1997, denaturalizes the notion of beauty in relation to the politics of gender and race of the gendered gaze. Her investigation suggests some of the ways in which modern discourse on beauty is linked to the complex legacy of Kant's notion of disinterested pleasure. Her excavations of the psychic and social structures of desire, occasioned by a close reading of the subtext of neoconservative art writings prominent in the early 1990s, allow a contemporary observer to appreciate what interests were and may still be served by the discourse of beauty. Jeffrey Doyle's 2006 essay interrogates the confliction of the notion of gay and queer art and artists, and makes a case for queer art as marking an integration of art into life, and a reversal of the early 20th century constructivist idea of the essence of art or artistry lay in its capacity for making strange the ordinary world of everyday life, where in a sense art is already queer. Doyle suggests that the queerness and apparent opposites are continually shifting positions, itself a perspective with resonances in many of the selections in this chapter. Any chapter whose selection covers the issues as diverse and complex as authorship, identity, gender, sexuality, or class after the present time is bound to be idiosyncratically and reflective of any compiler's most recent interest and the benefits and deficits of hindsight. Nonetheless, a cogent case might be made for the questions of authorship and identity in the discourse on art and artistry as having consistently been for over the past 4 decades a continuous evolving discourse about the fixity or fluidity of subject positions of all kinds. The functions of context that draw them are continually evolving and shifting. The selections in this chapter, drawn from very diverse sources, would seem to confirm such an impression, and that in addition, disciplinarity itself always itself in question, and this is no less the case with what we call art history.